I know why.
You recording this?
Yeah. I realized.
Do I have anything in my teeth? Okay. So I don't think this is like, I gotta jump around here a little bit. So this is in chapter 8, photosynthesis. We gotta know some photosynthesis if we're gonna understand plants. It's just, you should have learned this in 211, but you didn't. So there you go. Anybody take 211 last quarter? You took it last quarter? You took it last quarter? Did you cover photosynthesis? You did. Okay. Those of you in fall quarter, did you cover photosynthesis? No, because Sam's not a plant person. He's an animal person. I mean, all persons are animal persons, but that's fine. Okay. Photosynthesis. Fundamentally speaking, what does photosynthesis do? So let's start big picture, then we'll go down to the micro. So macro, big picture. Photosynthesis. Let's break this word down. Photo means what?
Light.
Good. What does it mean to synthesize?
Make it.
Yeah, not just make, but make how?
Make by putting together.
Yes, right, by putting things together, right? Put together. Okay. So in photosynthesis, light is being used to put things together. So fundamentally speaking here, what's happening is that plants and other photosynthetic organisms are taking non-living stuff and they're making living stuff out of it. Okay? So they take the non-living. Did you guys ever actually talk about what it means to be alive? Like, what are the characteristics of living organisms?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk about, what did you talk about that? 211, 212? Did you ever talk about that?
211.
We talked about the smallest form of life.
Is the what? Cell is the smallest unit that has all the characteristics of a living organism, which are, so you guys, it's funny, like the majors sort of miss out on some of the basics of biology. All living organisms are capable of, what's that? Reproduction. Based on what? DNA. 2. What's that? No.
Grow.
Respond to their environment. Good. They all grow. Good. They all. Well, no, but the product of evolution.
They all die?
No, not all die. Yeah. They're able to separate their internal environment from their external environment. And the last one, sort of engage in metabolism, right? They're able to take matter and energy from the environment in order to do the things they need to do, and as a byproduct, they produce waste. The list varies depending upon the authors, but kind of keep that stuff in mind. As a biology major, you should know these things. Anyway. So non-living stuff, when I'm talking about non-living stuff, I'm talking about stuff like water, CO2, nitrate, ammonia, and they go from non-living to living stuff. Kind of put this in quotes. What I think this is one of the most important concepts in all of biology. I am alone in this. Nobody else thinks this is important, but it's really cool. Is the concept of what we call biomass. Biomass is the matter that makes up living organisms. Now, when we talk about biomass in everyday life, we're talking about 3 specific groups of molecules. What are they? What are the 3 most important biomolecules? 2 most important groups of biomolecules. Yeah. Sugars, lipids, and nucleic acids. Now, nucleic acids they're super important. It's just these are food. Though recently we've discovered stuff that lives off of nucleic acids, which is kind of tricky. But these things are food, right? These are important. And when we talk about photosynthesis, we're really focused on sugars, though plants do also obviously make lipids and proteins. Everything has to make proteins as well. Okay? But this is like you guys are sort of like a step above intro level photosynthesis, so we're going to focus on sugars. Right. So the overall reaction of photosynthesis not 6H2O. There actually water is released, but don't worry, it balances out. Water does get released in the process, but don't worry about it. This is what we're interested in. Okay? Carbon dioxide and water combined with light energy produces glucose and releases oxygen as a byproduct. Okay? If we ran this in reverse, we would get what? Cellular aerobic respiration. Good. Okay, now where does this actually occur in the plant? How do you know where photosynthesis occurs in a plant? It's in the
Chloroplasts.
It's the green parts. That's why I like to wear green. Makes me feel like a plant. Inside the plant cells, there are organelles called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain a pigment called chlorophyll. We'll talk more about chlorophyll in a second here. That chlorophyll is what is doing, it's absorbing the light that's used in photosynthesis. Okay? Better with pictures. So, you guys ever see the Jetsons? Meet George Jetson. You ever saw the Jetsons? It was a cartoon from the 60s. And where they live in this like Cloud City in Star Wars. This reminds me of Cloud City. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So what's going on here is we have these, they look like, I don't know, thin nets or something, like these little stacked things. They're called thylakoids. They're these little discs, and they're stacked together in what are called grana. This is one grana, granum, multiple grana. Then there's the space between those and the membrane. That's called the stroma. So you guys remember endosymbiotic theory?
No.
No, endosymbiotic? You guys gotta learn more biology. So this is, what's that? Endosymbiotic theory, Limbaugh-Golis endosymbiotic theory? It's like one of the most important theories in like the history of biology. Okay. It says that mitochondria used to be free-living organisms?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Chloroplasts did too. So chloroplasts at one point in time were free-living organisms as well. They got engulfed by larger organisms, developed symbiosis, da, da, da. So what we're looking at here is sort of the remnant of that. Remember mitochondria looks like a bean? And it's got all these things on the inside of them? Okay, do you remember why it has all of those things on the inside? Very good, which is, it allows it to make what? Back up, makes ATP via the process of? Gradients, all about gradients. Gradients. Right? Yeah. It's the same basic thing that's going on here, right? Same basic thing that's going on here. These reactions are occurring inside and in the membrane, and what that does is that allows the membrane to create a gradient, and then the energy from that gradient is harvested to do stuff. Okay? Sound good? So it's fundamentally the same basic idea, just a different process. Okay. Why don't you start with oxygen first? Oxygen that's produced in photosynthesis comes from the first part of photosynthesis, the splitting of water. Water is like one of the first things. Water getting split in a process called photolysis. There's a spider on this.
You should put it out of misery. What are you doing? No, don't get over here.
Oh my god.
Okay. Okay? Yeah.
What gradients are you talking about?
We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
But I just kind of wanted to tap back in there. Okay. All right. Okay. Redox reactions. You guys remember redox reactions? Reduction, oxidation. Something gets reduced, something else gets oxidized. Okay. I always remember Leo the lion goes grr. Right? Lose electrons, oxidation. All right. So in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is getting reduced to glucose. Water is getting oxidized into oxygen. Okay. Okay. Now, remember in respiration, there's the first part, the anaerobic part. What's it called again? It's called
Glycolysis.
glycolysis. Thank you very much. Glycolysis, and then you enter the Krebs cycle. It's similar here, actually, what's going on. There are two parts. They're what we call either the light reactions or the light-dependent reactions. And then you have what's called, it's either called the Calvin cycle or they're called the light-independent reactions, but it is a cycle in the same way that the Krebs cycle is a cycle. Something's getting regenerated throughout the cycle, okay? The light-dependent reaction occurs in those grana, whereas this cycle actually occurs in the space, in the stroma, right? In that open space there, okay? It's the products of the light reaction, ATP and NADPH, NADPH, because NADH is used in respiration, NADPH is used in photosynthesis. These are produced here, and then they're used in the cycle as a way of making what's going to become glucose. Yeah?
How is it that sunlight acts as a catalyst to create this?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right. The inputs into, write this down. Light reactions and the light independent reactions, aka the Calvin cycle. It's funny, for a while we were moving away from naming things after people. So, but then we realized that students remember names better if it has a person's name attached to it, right? So calling it the light reaction versus light independent, it's kind of hard to remember who you call the Calvin cycle. Like, oh yeah, Calvin, yeah. Even though it wasn't actually done by one person, right? It was actually a whole group of them. So the inputs into the light reaction, water, light. Okay. And then, as we'll see here, NADP plus and ADP and some phosphates. Okay. So that's what's going in. Okay. All right. Talk a little bit about lights. Light reactions, light is important. So, you guys know how light works? Do you know how you see things? Right, so the light hits a surface, and then based upon the nature of that surface, the light that returns hits your eye interprets that. Okay, so this, should I pull this? No, it's not. So this, I'm gonna play with this. This looks red because red light is not being absorbed by this thing. Does that make sense? Okay. So white light, which covers the full spectrum, the full electromagnetic spectrum, ROY-G-div, stuff that we can see, hits that, and this surface absorbs everything but red. Okay, so it's actually the color that it's not, right? Because it's absorbing everything else. Okay, so green plants are absorbing everything but green light. Okay, they're absorbing everything else. Things that look black absorb most of the spectrum. Things that look white don't absorb much. Yeah, what's up?
So why is there different colors of flowers?
Ah.
Do you need like certain specific wavelength of it?
Yeah, so we'll get to that here. Let me see. Do I have this here? No, I don't. So it's actually in the book, which is kind of cool. So chlorophyll absorbs light, actually absorbs a lot of like blue light, blue and red. It absorbs those very, very well, blue, red, and purple. There are a bunch of other accessory pigments besides chlorophyll. They're the carotenoids, they're the xanthanoids, and so carotenoids, like carrots, what do you think they look like? Orange. They look orange, right? Meaning they're absorbing everything that's not orange. So what most plants do is they have these other accessory pigments that allow them to absorb. So chlorophyll A absorbs here and here. These other accessory pigments sort of fill that in, right? We only see those accessory pigments after chlorophyll A breaks down. Chlorophyll A is relatively expensive to produce and maintain, so plants tend to lose that first when they start to die or go dormant. And so in plant leaves, the chlorophyll degrades first and it leaves behind the other pigments, which is why certain plants do what? Change color. In the fall, when you see maples, for example, they go from the green leaves to the red leaves or the purple leaves. What you're seeing there are those accessory pigments that were there all along to help absorb those other parts of the spectrum. Now, flowers is a totally different thing. Flowers is about sex, and they're trying to attract whom? And birds. Now, bees see into the ultraviolet, right? So they see over here, and there, if you actually, I think there's some pictures in your book of flowers with ultraviolet light on them. Like what it actually looks like to a bee is trippy. It looks like a total acid trip, like woo. Okay, red flowers tend to be pollinated by.
No, I have a question.
Wait a second. Tend to be pollinated by birds, because birds have very similar eyes to us, and red really stands out. What's up?
Why is chlorophyll A degrade first?
It's a chlorophyll is it's a finicky kind of molecule.
When you said it, you said that it's more expensive, right? So, but I'm assuming it's not in terms of like our monetary, but in terms of like what the plant.
Yeah.
So if
Has to
that's,
maintain.
there's different types of chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, chlorophyll C. Yeah.
And do they each have a different purpose?
Yeah. They have a different signature. Yeah, they've got different evolutionary history. They show up in certain plants and others.
So does it process through each of these to reach an endpoint?
I mean, there are intermediates along the way to make chlorophyll, and then when chlorophyll degrades, it has all sorts of different things that it degrades down into. Chlorophyll's a bit finicky. It's a finicky molecule, whereas the carotenoids and the xanthanides are sort of more robust, but they're not as good at absorbing light. Yeah, that's sort of beyond the. Take a plant physiology class. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Chlorophyll's really good at what it does, but yeah. Okay. So this just demonstrates, right? Light, sunlight hits the chloroplasts. The chlorophyll within it absorbs all that light, but it reflects out the green light, which is why plants look green. Green plants look green. Okay. Now, what's actually happening? Okay. Light, right? Photons, wavicles, particle wave things. Individual photons hit these, what are called reaction centers. Reaction centers are made up of pigments. This is happening within the chloroplast. What happens here is that an electron gets excited. And it gets sent to an electron acceptor. Okay, you guys learned about this. It's very similar to what you learned about in respiration. Okay. Now, electron gets excited. That electron needs to be replaced. Where does the plant get the electron to replace that electron? It gets it from water. Whereas water is a byproduct of respiration because oxygen is a great receptor of electrons. In this case, what's happening is water is being split in this process we call photolysis. Photolysis. It's the splitting of water. Splitting H2O to produce O2 and getting those electrons, okay? And those protons. Right. All right. This is where oxygen is produced. That first step there. These electrons get used in the electron transport chain, the ETC, through the membrane, which sets up the gradient, and that's used to harvest ATP, similar to respiration. All right? These protons get used over here to turn NADP plus into NADPH. Now, I apologize. The first photosystem in this chain is known as photosystem 2. The second photosystem in the chain is photosystem 1. Yeah. Anybody know why? Any guesses on why that is?
Because photosystem 2 was discovered after.
Photosystem 1. Yeah, they found this one first. So it became photosystem. Why could they rename this? Right? Like, really? Like, really? Anyway. Okay. But this is what gives us the, so this is what goes into the light reaction, and then here's what comes out. We have our O2 comes out. We have our NADPH, our ATP, what am I forgetting? NADPH, ATP, O2. Yeah, those are the big things. They all come out, and O2 just goes. It goes into the atmosphere. The others will be used in the reactions. This is just kind of shows, this is the same thing. The chemiosmosis process of producing NADPH and ATP. It's the same thing. Okay? Questions? No. We're not going to go into the whole, like, the chemistry of all that. All right. So, NADPH and ATP from a light reaction goes into the light independent reactions, the Calvin cycle, along with CO2 from the atmosphere. That comes in. Okay. CO2, ATP, and NADPH. And the output is not actually glucose. It's this thing called G3P. This is what's going to come out. And we'll talk about why G3P is actually a better output than glucose. Okay, so here are the details of the Calvin cycle itself. All right, CO2 comes in from the atmosphere. So where in the plant is this occurring? Like where, like a plant, like if you look at a plant, the leaves, right? It's occurring in the leaves. The leaves are also where the gas exchange is occurring. It's where O2 is leaving, not surprisingly, because that's where photolysis is occurring. CO2 is coming in as well through those stomata. Remember, I mentioned this last week, little holes under the leaves where the CO2 comes in. Those all occurring in the leaf. Okay, CO2 comes in. All right, now the first thing that happens, there's this really important, it's some consider the most important enzyme on the planet, called rubisco. I always makes me think Nabisco, but rubisco. Rubisco is what does what we call carbon fixation. You heard this term carbon fixation before? Carbon fixation. Carbon fixation's it's a big deal evolutionarily, ecologically, but in terms of like climate change, it's really important too. Because if we can take CO2 out of the atmosphere, out of a gaseous form, and put it into a solid form, that is what will get CO2 out of the atmosphere and stop global warming. So this whole carbon fixation thing, fixing, we call it fixing carbon. What's happening is that this CO2 gets fixed, it gets attached to this ribulose bisphosphate molecule, RUBP, okay? And the enzyme that does that is rubisco, ribulose bisphosphate carboxylate oxygenase. Okay, the full name. The thing that it makes is super unstable and it breaks apart right away and forms this thing over here called 3-PGA, 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde. You don't have to know all these names, by the way. You have to know like the long name, the abbreviation you need to know. Now, this is where the ATP and the NADPH come in. So ATP, energy, what's happening here is it's going to convert this 3-PGA along with the NADPH into this thing called G3P. G3P, make sure I get the name of G3P right. G3P. Yeah, they call it G3P. I can't remember. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, G3P. Okay? Glyceraldehyde with 3 phosphates on it. Oh, sorry, glyceraldehyde is 3 glyceraldehyde with a phosphate on it. This is 1 phosphate. Glyceraldehyde is 3 carbon. Glyceraldehyde is 1 phosphate. Okay? This is actually what's produced from the cycle, not glucose. Now, what is special about this is it can be a precursor to glucose, right? Because it's only got 3 carbons, not 6. And it's got a little phosphate on it, which means that it's reactive. So the plant can use this for all sorts of things. If it wants to make glucose, if it wants to make cellulose, if it wants to make galactose, if it wants to make, you know what I'm talking about, sucrose. It can make all sorts of stuff because it's actually only 3 carbons instead of 6, and it's got the phosphate on it. It's a super useful molecule. So it goes on to make glucose and then other compounds. Now, what still has to happen though is these G3P need to be regenerated to form more RUBP. This is why it's a cycle, right? So this RUBP gets regenerated by using more ATP, which converts the G3P back into RUBP, which can then accept more CO2, and thus the cycle. Okay? That's why it's a cycle. And why are cycles, what's so nice about cycles as opposed to linear systems? What's up? Right, and they're perpetual. They just keep going and going. They tend to be more efficient, right? Just going and going and going and going and going. All right? Okay. Now, of course, as byproducts, in addition to the G3P, you get that ADP plus 3 plus, which will then go back into the light reactions. All right? So this is sort of the full thinger. The light reactions, water, light, O2 is released, protons are used for chemiosmosis. They produce ATP and NADPH, which is used in the Calvin cycle. In the Calvin cycle, RUBP is getting regenerated from that GTP, which can then go on and become sugars. Don't forget the CO2. Yeah.
So the ADP, P, and NADP are all other outputs as well?
Yep, they're outputs that end up getting used back in the light reactions. Okie dokie. All right. Now, some plants do something kind of funny. As a way of saving water, instead of forming a, instead of the CO2 going directly in and fixing with the RUBP, they form this 4-carbon compound first. These are called C4 plants. Corn is one of these. Corn is a super water efficient plant. The amount of, yeah.
Are these the plants that are supposed to be better for the?
Yes, because they're high, right, these are the plants that we think will start to take over more in a high CO2 world, right? Because they're better at fixing carbon, right? So they're able to take in more CO2, they form this 4-carbon compound, and the process the problem that plants fundamentally face with those stomata is when those stomata open to let in CO2, they let water out. So if you can take in more CO2 every time you open up, it's more efficient, okay? So the C4 plants they're taking in more CO2, and that means they're more efficient. Corn, sugarcane. By the way, that's why they produce so much sugar, is because they can just take in so much CO2. Another cool group of plants are the camp plants. What they do is they open their stomata at night, and they turn the CO2 into another 4-carbon compound called chrysolacean acid. It's an acidic thing. But the reason they do that is so that they can open their stomata at night when it's cooler, and then during the day, they perform the Calvin cycle, which is kind of funny. So again, the Calvin cycle can happen in the presence of light, it just doesn't require light the same way that the light reactions do. Desert plants do this, cactuses do this. We have a plant that grows around here, it's not a desert plant, but it still does this, called oxalis. If you're stuck in the desert and you need water, some people will cut open a cactus and drink that. It's fine, except for the fact that some people are really allergic to this thing, and they have allergic reaction and die. Yeah. But it's a way that the plants have evolved to open their stomata at night to take in the carbon dioxide, then they can close it during the day, so they can preserve water. Okay, dokie. Yeah.
So those kind of situations are form of adaptations for the environment?
Alright.
What's the compound name, you said?
Chrysolacean acid, they're camp plants, CRASSULACEAN, yeah, CRASSULACEAN, acid, ACID. All right, let's take a break in 10 minutes.